So you have to remember that you've got a provision in your initiative that I think would really set many districts on their ear, and that is the provision that allows for lawsuits to be brought forth against school districts.
You've raised a lot of issues.
Okay, let's hold on a
little.
minute.
I'd like to really respond because you got virtually every fact wrong in what you were saying, unfortunately.
Well, you wrote it.
Excuse me.
So I just read it.
Excuse me. Going through the things, Delane Easton, the state superintendent of schools, has specifically said she will, despite the school board's decision, she will continue enforcing the current law, she says, until the law is changed. The only chance of the law being changed is our initiative. So in other words, Delane Easton says she will continue to enforce statewide mandatory bilingual education until our initiative and if our initiative passes. Second of all, when you say, for example, the school district of Westminster, and it isn't a county, it's a school district, their test scores went down, or they had problems with switching to English immersion program, that's utterly false. Their test scores went up once they started teaching the children English, and that's why other school districts have followed their example.
But why did they need more than a year?
Excuse me, when you talk about
that's something important, I think, for the...
Excuse me, going on...
Well, I was just asking, I didn't mean to,
No, I mean, going on with what we're talking about. Again, maybe for some reason, students in California who don't know English require the 7 years to learn English that bilingual advocates say that they do. But students everywhere else in the world learn the national language in generally less than a year. Lots of people I know have come here from other countries. When they come to the United States, they've learned English in just a matter of a few months if they're a young child. Again, we're talking about a system that is used everywhere else in the world except in California. And when you look at California right now, why are American test scores so much lower, as just came out recently in that study?
Would you explain the study?
Well, the study showed, for example, that American test scores in academic subjects are much lower for students in the United States than in other countries around the world. I think a contributing factor is that we use this failed system of bilingual education, which has never worked anywhere on a large scale anywhere in the United States in 30 years. But the people who make their living from it refuse to let the program die because it, again, is their living. I'd also like to say that finally, in conclusion, our initiative, for example, takes the money that currently is spent not teaching children English and spends that money teaching children English. But once the children learn English, the money no longer has to be spent. And our initiative will therefore save hundreds of millions of dollars a year, which will go to local school districts to be spent on textbooks and smaller class size and all the other things, rather than this failed system of Spanish-only instruction.
Well, I'm getting increasingly uncomfortable with the underlying allegations that somehow it's the Latino population that has to have all these problems. I think you really need to be careful that you're not suggesting that, you know, it's this population of Spanish speakers who somehow continue to raise this failure rate. But more importantly than that, you know, I think that we have to remember that of all the children in the state who need bilingual education, less than barely a third are in bilingual education programs. The vast majority are not in bilingual education programs. Therefore, it's completely wrong to suggest or allege that 95% of bilingual programs are failing. Secondly, I think it's important, again, in terms of student success, there are many complex reasons that go into the education of children at all ages. And for one sweeping dictum to somehow present itself as being the end-all answer is simply naive and deceitful. And I think the issue goes back to where does control belong in the education of children? It belongs in the hands of the parents and in the hands of the school districts. And I think the issue that you're trying to put forth on the American people is really leading them down a path that would suggest that somehow there's this magical, simplistic solution. If you can merely put people in this program for 1 year, it's going to solve all these problems. I can tell you at the college level, we see immigrant students every single day. The ones who have been enrolled in defined programs of bilingual instruction excel because they've learned in the language they best understand, and they've gone on to excel in the second language, English. I've never met an immigrant child or adult who has not wanted to learn English, who has not tried to learn English, and when given the opportunity, has done so.
You've raised a very good point, and that actually is the reason we have such overwhelming support within the Latino community of California. This initiative began when I read a series of articles in Los Angeles Times describing how a group of immigrant Latino parents in downtown Los Angeles actually had to begin a public boycott of their local elementary school because the school was refusing to teach their children English. Latinos overwhelmingly want their children to be taught English, and that is not the case today. What we call bilingual education is Spanish-only instruction, and that's why Latinos are failing.
Ron, do you think some of the animosity that has come about because of this proposition is because you are Caucasian, and that perhaps it should have come, if there was opposition, that it should have come from Spanish-speaking communities, Asian-speaking communities, other language-speaking communities?
To be honest, we have very strong support from Asians, from Hispanics, from all the different groups in California. The honorary chairman of our campaign is Jaime Escalante, probably the nation's most prominent public school teacher. He told me when I met with him that for years he'd been fighting bilingual education. He'd managed to kill it off at his school, and the only reason his students were able to excel, were able to take the calculus AP exam, which made him famous, was that he'd managed to get rid of bilingual education in the school. Fernando Vega, a local Redwood City resident, he was the member of the local school board in Redwood City who originally established bilingual education here. But he's seen over the years it doesn't work, and then the last straw for him is when they took his own grandchildren, who don't speak a word of Spanish, and they put them in a Spanish-only program because his last name was Vega. And at that point, he made an effort to get rid of bilingual education. All of us are working together to end this failed government program, which ruins the educational future of so many children in California.
All right. I think Ron brought up several points again. First of all, Jaime Escalante is a math teacher. He teaches math to children in English. So he doesn't have the background in bilingual education that I think a lot of the folks that are in opposition to 227 do have. In addition, Ron brings up once again that students, you know, somehow that there's this great support in the Latino community. And the original field poll went out and said, hey, do you want your children to learn English? And everyone wants their children to learn English, and everyone said yes. And as people within the Latino community and within the general community have learned more about what is in Proposition 227, they oppose it. The numbers have gone down. From December to February, the polling has dropped 21 points in the Latino community. It's now at 40-some-odd percent, 45%, which is not winning in the Latino community.
We only have about 2 minutes. So
I wanted to say that this Proposition 227 will not fix any of the problems that Ron Unz is addressing. It will not teach children English. All research shows children need more than a year to learn English. It also will appropriate $50 million a year additionally to individuals who pledge to tutor a child in English with no strings attached.
I'd like you to come back and let's just talk on that, but very quickly. I'll give you about 45 seconds, and then I'd like Dr.
What you've said
Martinez.
is utterly false. The question that Latinos were asked is there's a new initiative which proposes that all public school instruction be conducted in English, and that children who aren't fluent in English be placed in short-term English immersion programs. That was the LA Times question. It's the largest survey so far that's been taken of Latinos. It showed 84% of Latinos would support such a policy. And the initiative does not give the money to individuals. It gives it to local school districts. And if you continue fabricating that,
Well,
you'll discredit yourself completely.
It doesn't
says
say
that in the
that,
text
Ron.
of the initiative.
Well,
Dr.
it doesn't say
Martinez.
that.
Well, again, I think the important things to remember here are the education of children is what we're talking about, and that's what is at stake. And the general public, every parent of any school-age child knows there are good schools and there are not such good schools. There are effective classrooms and there's classrooms that are not so effective. There are good textbooks, there are not such good textbooks. Fix the problem. Don't erase the whole opportunity.
We'll stop on opportunity. I want to thank you for the opportunity of giving your ideas and so people can study and know what this proposition is all about. Ron Unz, Holli Thier,
Claire.
Dr. Olivia Martinez, thank you all for being here. Thank you for being here, and please join us again.